Hey all, and welcome back to my beginner and Iron Man PVM series, where I go through some entry-level bosses in a lot of detail, really focusing on getting those first few kills if you aren't an experienced PVMer or if you don't have a ton of gear. This video we cover Vindicta, who's a really popular mid-level boss for both mainscapers and Iron Men because of her excellent unique drops like the Dragon Rider Lance, as well as her general profitability on mainscape. I'm going to cover recommended requirements, gear setup, a recommended inventory setup, ability bars, boss mechanics, as well as run a full kill to show you how it all comes together. At the end, I'll go over some additional details about the boss, including things like the God Wars 2 reputation system and stuff like that. As usual, I'll put timestamps in the comments if you want to skip to a particular section. Requirements. There's only one true requirement for doing Vindicta, and that's 80 attack, which is boostable. But realistically, you'll also want at least 75 combat in your chosen style. So that's attack, strength, and defense if you're going to do melee, or magic and defense if you plan to use mage. You can range this boss, but due to most of the damage you'll be receiving being melee, you will take more damage this way, which will lead to slower kills due to the combat triangle. You'll also want at least level 70 prayer, and the Knight's Way prayers unlocked, which is super strong and generally underrated amongst mid-game players. Obviously, if you have the tier 95 curses unlocked, use them instead, but the tier 70 prayers work fine too. I'd also recommend access to super potions or better. Overloads are fantastic here as they'll really boost your kill times, but just bring what you can. During testing, I found the difference in kill times between using supers and overloads to be less than 10% anyway. If you have Invention unlocked, also remember to add perks to your weapons. I'll have some details on budget perks later in the guide. Access to War's Retreat and the War's Retreat teleport spells are great as well. They make getting to the boss a lot easier, and you can restock ingredients between kills much faster. Lastly, there's a mini quest you can do called Tales of the God Wars that gives you 500 reputation in a boss of your choice, which corresponds to a 25% boost to your drop chances at that boss. If you're planning to spend some time at Vindicta, I would definitely recommend completing the mini quest. For gear, I'd recommend a dual wield setup for beginners. Using some kind of shield switch in phase 2 is basically required, and dual wielding makes the switch a little easier. That said, if you're comfortable with switching and you have a strong two-handed weapon, then go for it. For melee, I'd recommend Bainite weaponry or attuned crystal weaponry for Iron Men, as they're relatively easy to obtain. Bainite weaponry can be smithed at level 80 post the mining and smithing update, and you can get a single free attuned crystal weapon seed if you have level 90 smithing and Prif unlocked. You would still need an offhand weapon though. If you're a main account, then simply buy the highest tier weapon within your budget. For magic, high tier gear is a little harder to obtain as you can't get it from mining and smithing. You can still use your free attuned crystal weapon seed from Lady Ithil to make an attuned crystal wand, which is level 80. Alternatively, you can get weapons from ports, but the requirements are quite steep. I'd recommend melee for Iron Men purely because the gear is much easier to obtain post the mining and smithing update. For main accounts, this is obviously less of an issue, as you can simply buy the highest tier weapon you can afford from the Grand Exchange. The Wand and Orb of the Cyware Elders is a good option at tier 85, but so is a Virtus Wand and Orb at tier 80, and an Abyssal Wand and Orb at tier 75 are dirt cheap if you are on a real budget. Next up, you'll need a shield or shield equivalent if you're going mage. A shield is basically mandatory for lower geared accounts, as you're going to need to use a resonance ability in phase 2. For melee, the Bainite Square Shield is an excellent shield which is easier to get. The Boundless War Shield from God Wars 1 is an alternative, but probably not quite as good as the resonance healing you get scales to the shield's tier. For mage, getting a high tier shield is again a little harder for Iron Men. You can buy a Mystic Shield from the Wizards Guild, it's only tier 50 so it will reduce your ability to heal from resonance compared to a higher tier shield, but the tier of your shield isn't as important as simply having one. For main accounts, I'd recommend the Water Subjugation from God Wars 1. Lastly, if you're not confident about shield switching, you can actually use a Defender or a Rebounder instead. They're untradeable, but they're not hard to obtain from Barrows. For those of you who don't know, a Defender is a hybrid of a shield and an offhand, counting as both but at half the tier. So you could just keep the Defender equipped the whole time, using both your defensive abilities and your dual wield abilities at the same time. In theory, because of a tier penalty your Defender gets, this should get you slightly slower kill times than bringing a higher tier offhand in a shield, but if you're getting used to the mechanics, it gives you one less variable to think about, so it might help. During testing, I found kill times using a Defender were less than 5% slower than bringing a shield switch. For the rest of your gear, you just want to bring whatever maximizes your offensive bonuses. In general, this means power armor over tank armor, even if the power armor is a lower tier. Gorbals 1 armor like Bandos the subjugation gear is completely fine. You could potentially do it in worse gear too. In the following clips I'll be using melee armor with a mix of Gorbals 1 armor plus some dragon stuff. I'll put a link in the video description to the wiki, which has up-to-date information on optimal gear setups. But some good options for Iron Men are the Asylum Surgeon Ring from the Broken Homes quest, and the Dragon Rider Amulet from One of a Kind. Bringing a Fight Kill 'em cape is also a great option, and really not that hard to earn in 2021, even for lower level players. You can see the gear I'll be using in this video, highlighted now. For perks, I'll specifically talk about some budget perks you can put on your weapons and armor to help in Vindicta. The exact probabilities of getting different perk combinations varies a lot with your invention level, so I'll only cover this at a very high level and leave a link to the wiki in the description. I'm also assuming that as this is a budget guide, you don't have access to Ancient Invention, but if you do, then you'll be able to get slightly better versions of these perks, and the wiki has you covered on the best way to get them as well. First, Precise and Equilibrium are great budget perks. You can get Precise 3 and Equilibrium 2 on a single gizmo using just Precise components. This perk combo alone gives you about a 6% damage increase, so it's not trivial. Crackling 3 is another budget perk, which you can make from explosive components, which are really easy to obtain from the Chaos Dwarf battlefield, and you can potentially combo it with other perks too. Biting is another perk you can go for, but it is a little more expensive than the others. Lastly, Dragon Slayer does not work at Vindicta, so don't bring it. Moving on to armor perks, we have Crackling again. You can have it on either a weapon or an armor gizmo, although note it doesn't stack. Then we have Biting again. As above, it doesn't stack, so don't bring it on an armor piece if you've already brought it on a weapon piece. Note that you can't bring Precise and Equilibrium on an armor piece, so to really maximize your DPS, bring those perks on your weapons and then these perks on your armor. Other perks to mention are Enhanced Devoted and Impatient. They're both great perks, but require you to have access to a bunch of faceted components that are a little difficult to obtain, or Zamorakian or Zerosian components that are also quite difficult to obtain. So I've kind of arbitrarily decided they're not budget perks, so I'm not going to talk about those. The inventory setup is fairly simple. Most important is your shield switch, unless you're using a defender. Next, you should bring whatever your best DPS potion is. I have Searing Overloads in my screenshot, but you don't actually need any anti-fire protection in Vindicta, it's just what I happen to have to hand. You'll want some prayer pots or super restores as well. The exact amount you need depends on how many kills you plan to get per trip. Next, always bring a familiar. If you bring a Beast of Burden, you won't need to restock so much, so that will increase your kills per hour. But I would personally recommend a DPS familiar, as I think the faster kill times are more important. Restocking at Water Treat between trips takes about 40 seconds between killing Vindicta and re-entering the instance. That includes praying at the altar, recharging your adrenaline, and restocking from the bank. If you stay for another kill, the fastest way to respond to the boss is to leave the arena and then re-enter the instance, which takes about 10 seconds and is a little sweaty with the adrenaline stalling and recharging your prayer. I mention this because, depending on how many kills you get per trip, you might find that bringing a Beast of Burden to increase your trip time helps more than bringing a DPS familiar, but in general, I do think the DPS familiar is better. I also have a space in my inventory for ingression fragments. I'll talk about them at the end when I cover reputation. Lastly, I've just filled out the rest of my inventory with food. I'm bringing sharks. You can bring lower quality food, but you will need to eat more, which will slow your DPS, so I think sharks are a good choice here. For ability bars, I put down the recommended ability bars from the wiki on screen for both dual wield, melee, and magic. But I've also put a link in the wiki to a full breakdown of optimal ability bars if you've unlocked additional abilities or want to use a different combat style. I've also included what I consider useful abilities to also make sure you have on your ability bar for easy use. These are Resonance, Devotion, Debilitate, Reflect, Bladed Dive, Protect from Melee, and Protect from Missiles. Vindicta does require some precise timing for some mechanics, and you need to manage your adrenaline to make sure you have enough for specific thresholds at specific times. So I would recommend using full manual over Revolution at this boss, although I did try several kills using Revolution and it actually worked fairly well. So you definitely can use Revolution if you're not comfortable with full manual. Phase 1 for Vindicta is relatively simple and mechanics light, although there are things you can do to mitigate damage. Vindicta attacks with a melee auto attack in Phase 1 that can hit up to 3000, so praying melee is advised. Her attack rate is actually very slow though, so Soul Split can also potentially heal through the damage if you have access to high level curses. Next, she has a Whirlwind AoE attack that is effectively a regular melee attack with 100% accuracy. Finally, she has a Flame Wall attack, although technically it's Gorvek the Dragon that creates this. A line of fire appears on the floor centered on your character, which does up to 1000 magical damage per tick, as long as you stand in it. This does a lot of damage if you stand in it, and you will die, although you can typically avoid being hit by more than a single tick, and sometimes avoid being hit entirely. An important thing to note here is that despite being fire, and despite coming from a dragon, this is not a dragonfire attack. Protection from dragonfire does nothing to reduce damage from Gorvek, so don't bring any. There is actually a fourth mechanic in phase 1, which is a ranged auto attack Vindicta can do, although she won't ever use this if you're in melee distance. I would avoid cutting Vindicta, even if you're using ranged or magic, for a variety of reasons that I'll cover later, so this mechanic can be mostly ignored. Vindicta doesn't use her abilities at random though, she follows a set rotation. In general, this rotation is 3 melee attacks, followed by her whirlwind attack, followed by 2 more melee attacks, followed by the firewall, and then she repeats. There are 2 exceptions to this rotation. 1, at the very start of the fight, she only makes 2 attacks before doing her whirlwind. I'm not sure if this is intended, but it's consistent. 2, if you try kiting Vindicta, she will sometimes skip auto attacks, as well as sometimes make an attack at ranged. In general, I'd avoid kiting because breaking the rotation makes the fight much less predictable and harder to manage. Let's look a little more closely at her abilities in phase 1. The auto attacks should just be prayed against with Protect from melee, or healed through Soul Split. Her whirlwind can also just be face tanked in the same way, but it is 100% accurate, so you can choose to heal from it with resonance as well. Alternatively, you can use devotion to simply block the damage. Personally, I find using resonance isn't worth the DPS sacrifice, but your mileage may vary. Lastly, the key mechanic to manage for phase 1 is the Flame Wall. Before Gorvek the dragon breathes out the fire, you can see Vindicta raise both her swords into the air, like she's doing in this clip. Then, a line of fire appears on the ground underneath your character. The angle of the flame wall is random, so you can't exactly predict where it's going to be. Nevertheless, with good timing, you can generally move away before you take damage, or only take a single tick of damage, which is quite manageable. Once you're used to the timing, you can move just before she raises her swords to maximize your chance of avoiding the flame wall. I also find Bladed Dive can be useful here to avoid the flame wall more consistently. Sometimes you'll get unlucky and you'll accidentally walk parallel to the wall and take a little more damage like you see here, but you should never really take more than 2 or 3 ticks of damage even then. This mechanic can be frustrating as the tick system is clunky, especially if you're experiencing lag and you can't guarantee avoiding damage from the flame wall consistently. But that's what food's for, so just eat up if you take too much damage. In phase 2, Gorvek flies down and Vindicta hops on her back to fight you as a pair. Phase 2 is, at least initially, a lot more challenging than phase 1, and requires a more precise understanding of the mechanics. That said, once you get used to phase 2, you'll actually take less damage here than in phase 1, and potentially not need any food at all. Vindicta keeps her standard auto attack, but she gains a ranged AoE attack that hits extremely hard, up to 4,500 damage and with 100% accuracy. She will use this in a rotation even if you're within melee range. She also keeps her flame wall, although the mechanics change slightly. She flies to a corner of the arena and then creates a flame wall in a straight line between you and where she landed. Other than this change, it's similar to the flame wall mechanic from phase 1. As in phase 1, the abilities are used as part of a set rotation. First, Vindicta makes a single auto attack with her lance. Then, she uses her AoE range attack which hits extremely hard. Then she makes another melee attack with her lance. Then, she flies away to the corner of the arena and targets you with her flame wall. Then she repeats. Similarly to phase 1, if you try to kite, this can lead to the rotation getting mixed up and Vindicta skipping her melee auto attacks. This makes managing phase 2 much more difficult, so I would not recommend kiting unless you're very confident. Okay, so what's the best way to manage phase 2? It mostly comes down to managing the powerful ranged attack that will really mess your day up if you aren't careful. There's a couple of things you can do, which I'll list in terms of how you should prioritize them. 1. You can use resonance. After Vindicta pokes you with her lance for the first time, you know that the next attack will be her ranged one. So switch out to your shield and use resonance. Make sure you don't take the shield off until after resonance is procced. This will ensure not only do you take no damage at all, but you'll actually heal a lot. You can see me healing about 3,000 damage in this clip here, which is huge. This requires some practice as you have to equip the shield, proc resonance, and then re-equip your offhand weapon, and do all of this with the correct timing. Using a defender does make this easier as you skip the weapon switching. 2. You can use devotion. If you're using devotion, you don't need to switch out to your shield, but you will need to switch to prayer from melee to ranged and then back again. Devotion won't heal you, but it will prevent you taking any damage, as long as you have the correct prayer up at the correct time. One thing to note here is that Devotion is a threshold ability, so you'll need to make sure you have at least 50% adrenaline to use Devotion. 3. You can use Reflect or Debilitate. Both of these only decrease damage by 50%, although if combined with swapping out to protect from range, this becomes 75%. Reflect requires a shield, so it does require a lot of clicks, because you have to change to your shield, proc Reflect, switch from melee to range prayer, then switch back to your offhand, and then finally switch back to prayer from melee. Debilitate is easier to do, because you don't need to shield switch, but it's also less reliable. Debilitate is a defensive ability which, if it hits, reduces the damage a monster does by 50% for about 8 seconds. But if it misses, it just doesn't do anything. If you have lower than 100% accuracy at a boss, just remember that it's possible you could time everything right, but your Debilitate simply misses, and you'll take full damage. Lastly, you can just switch to protect from ranged, and face tank the damage. This is obviously mechanically very simple, but you'll take up to 2,250 damage from the hit, so it's your worst strategy to employ in terms of taking damage. I'd only do this if you're struggling with the timings, or if you run out of adrenaline to use your thresholds. In theory, you would use Resonance every time, but in practice, because of ability cooldowns, you can only use Resonance every other rotation. So, if a fight lasted 4 rotations, then you could use Resonance on the first and third hit. Additionally, you can use Devotion every 4 rotations, so typically your strategy would be something like Reso the first hit, Devotion the second, Reso the third hit, then use Debilitate or Reflect on the 4th hit, and then you'd repeat. That covers the mechanics, so next up I'm going to run through a full kill so we can see how this all comes together. Okay, so at the start of the fight, do a little bit of adrenaline stalling with Flash there, put on my Protect from melee, and then just start wailing away, focusing at this point just on DPS. Obviously always walk your bleeds, it adds a ton of DPS to your damage, and I use Devotion there on the Whirlwind just to save me a little bit of damage. It's not a huge amount, but every little helps, and it means I have to eat less, so that gives helps with adrenaline management later on. A little bit slow there on dodging that flame wall, so I took one tick of damage. I think it was like 600, which was unnecessary, and I actually used Debilitate there just to, again on the Whirlwind. I think it didn't end up doing much. Looking at that, it probably saved me about 500 damage, which really isn't worth it. I'd probably been better off just using a more offensive threshold. But I think it could have saved me more. Again, a little late on the bladed dive there to get out of the way of the flame wall. Took another tick of damage to like 800, which is unnecessary. And again, remember, every time you use Slaughter, just remember to keep walking your bleeds. It's the one exception to the don't kite rule, because it adds so much DPS. If you can make a move when you have Slaughter on it, because it adds a lot. Finally get Bladed Dive time to dodge the flame wall. Bladed Dive does actually help. It may not look like it in this video with my slow timings, but it gives you a lot more leeway on the timing, and also makes it less likely that you accidentally move into the flame wall as it appears. So it does help overall. And again, most of this phase is just DPSing, right? Plus making sure that as the flame wall comes in, you're ready, just like there. Okay, that's a little bit more smooth, dodging the flame wall as it appears. And there you go, that's phase 2. So at this point, this is the more dangerous phase, potentially. So she does her one melee hit, you just saw her there. So then I bring out my shield and get almost 2,000 reso on that, which is nice. And that's really why phase 2 potentially can be, easier than phase 1 if you do get the resonance right. I have to use Debilitate here, everything else is on cooldown. But with Debilitate plus protecting range, I only took 500 damage from that range hit, which isn't much at all. That's really fine. I tried to Bladed Dive, but it was on cooldown. Oh, that was terrible. So that was a big mistake there, right? I thought my Bladed Dive was on cooldown, was up, but it wasn't. So I accidentally just walked into the fire and took a bunch of damage. But the important thing, right, when you do bosses is that if that happens, you don't panic, right? You just go back to the rotation, right? So obviously all I did was I just walked back out the fire, put on my shield, resoed that the hit that came in, got a nice like 3,000 heal to heal the damage I lost by just walking into the flame wall, and then just go back to the rotation, right? So basically, effectively, I lost like a shark by doing that. Probably took a few seconds off my kill time as well. But at this point, I'm kind of back stable with my rotation, back to doing, alternating between resonance and one of my threshold abilities for the ranged hit. And again, let's not talk about me flashing into that flame wall. But yeah, this, the fight's almost over here. It's probably going to be one more rotation before I actually take her down. One thing to note is if you tag with Slaughter like I've been doing here right before she flies away, she actually walks her own bleed, which is nice because it can be difficult to walk a bleed in phase 2 because the phase is quite tight and quite click intensive. But that's the full kill, complete with lots of mistakes I can work on. Okay, so this guide is very nearly over. The last two things I want to cover is the reputation system and kill count systems for this boss, and the God Wars 2 bosses in general. Firstly, kill count. You need 40 kills on the God Wars 2 minions for a specific god before you can fight their general, very similar to God Wars 1. What is different is the KC does not reset when you leave the Heart of Gielinor, so you can potentially get your kill count and then leave, restock and come back. This also applies to any excess kill count you get. So if you have 60 KC for Zerosian minions and then start an instance with Vindicta, you'll only lose 40 KC and still have 20 left. So you can basically bank up a lot of KC, which makes the process much more efficient than God Wars 1. If you just care about getting KC as fast as possible, the best way to get it is to find these areas on these platforms where the different God Wars minions fight each other. And there are tons of low HP minions that you can tag and finish off quickly. You have this little bar up top of your screen that goes up as you kill minions, so if you can kill minions quickly, you can start getting double or even triple KC per minion killed. This isn't god specific, so sometimes it can help to kill minions of gods you don't even care about, just to keep your streak up. And you bank the KC until you use it, so you don't really lose anything by doing this. Just be careful about over aggroing, as the God Wars 2 minions do a lot of damage and can kill you fairly quickly if they all gang up on you. The last thing to note on KC is that if you leave the arena after starting an instance, the instance stays, so you can go back to it, and you won't need to kill any more minions. Basically, once you get your KC and start an instance at Vindicta, or any other general, that instance lasts a total of an hour, and you can leave and come back as many times as you want, although the instance timer does continue to count down even when you're not in the arena. Secondly, the reputation system. You have an independent reputation system for each God Wars general, which gives you various benefits that I'm showing now. The big bonuses here are the progressively increased drop chance, up to 100% increase, which means doubling, as well as getting access to God Wars 2 invention components, kill count reductions, and the ability to make your own God Wars 2 armor for Iron Man. You can get reputation by collecting ingression fragments. These are dropped by the minions, and then you can cash them in for small amounts of reputation for a god of your choice once you have enough. You can also hand in the insignias that the generals drop to the representatives in the middle of the Heart of Gielinor. Obviously, each representative only accepts the insignias you get from killing enemy generals. You can't get Zerosian reputation by killing Vindicta, for example. Each insignia is worth 5 reputation. You can also complete bounties for this guy Feng. He gives 1 bounty a day, and you can stack up to 4. The way it works is, you say who you want to get reputation for, and then he assigns a random god for you to get kill count against. This can be a little frustrating, as he might not assign you the god you were planning to kill, and you can only re-roll a limited number of times, but the reputation reward is quite high, at 150 reputation, which is the same as 30 boss kills. You can also get anima crystals, which you can hand in to the faction representatives. Unlike everything else on this list, you don't get anima crystals from the Heart of Gielinor itself, and instead you get it from outside. You can get it in a bunch of different ways, for example metamorphic geodes for mining, you can buy them from the travelling merchant for cash, you can even get them as a reward for the weekly Helping Meg minigame. Each crystal gives 500 reputation, which is a lot. That's the equivalent of handing in the insignias from 100 boss kills. But they can be hard to get, so not necessarily the most reliable method. There are also some one-off reputation rewards, like killing a boss for the first time, or completing Tales of the God Wars mini-quest. That just about wraps it up for this guide. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found it helpful, and let me know in the comments if you'd like to see any other bosses covered. Also, please check out my other content if you enjoyed this to follow the process of my Hardcore Iron Man. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your bossing.